Okay, I'm live now, and so is
I
the
should.
writing.
Okay, let's start. Once again. Foundations of Arithmetic by
Page number.
Gottlob Frege, page number 12.
Wait, I'll mute myself and I'll go get something to eat. Wait. Okay, start, and I'll be muted too. So yeah, go on. Fat.
Yeah, once again. But who will give me company? You're not allowed to sleep. Hello. All right. Introduction, page number 12. When we ask someone what the number 1 is or what the symbol 1 means, we get as a rule the answer, why a thing? And if we go on to point out that the proposition, the number 1 is a thing, is not a definition because it has the definite article on one side and the indefinite on the other, or that it only assigns the number 1 stating which thing it is, then we shall very likely be invited to select something for ourselves, anything we please to call 1. Yet if everyone had the right to understand by this name whatever he pleased, then the same proposition about 1 would mean different things for different people. Such propositions would have no common content. Some perhaps will decline to answer the question, pointing out that it is impossible to state either what it meant by the letter A, as it is used in arithmetic, and that if we were to say A means a number, this would be open to same objection as the definition 1 is a thing. Now, in the case of A, it is quite right to decline to answer. A does not mean some one definite number, which can be specified, but serves to express the generality of general propositions. If in A plus A minus A equal to A, we put for a some number, any we please, but the same throughout, we always get a true identity. This is the sense in which the letter A is used. With 1, however, the position is essentially different. Can we in the identity 1 plus 1 equal to 2, but for 1 in both places, someone and same object, say the moon? On the contrary, it looks as though whatever we put for the first one, we must put something different for the second. Why is it that we have to do here precisely what would have been wrong in the other case? Again, arithmetic cannot get along with A alone, but has to use further letters besides B, C, and so on in order to express in general form relations between different numbers. It would therefore be natural to suppose that symbol 1, 2, if it served in some similar way to confer generality on propositions, could not be enough by itself. Yet surely the number 1 looks like a definite particular object with properties that can be specified. For example, that of remaining unchanged when multiplied by itself. In this sense, A has no properties that can be specified, since whatever can be asserted of A is common property of all numbers, whereas 1 raised to 1 equal to 1 asserts nothing of the moon, nothing of the sun, nothing of the Sahara, nothing of the peak of Tenerife, for what could be the sense of any of such assertion? Questions like these catch even mathematicians, for that matter, or most of them, unprepared with any satisfactory answer. Yet, is it not a scandal that our science should be so unclear about first and foremost among its objects, and one which is apparently so simple? Small hope, then, that we shall be able to say what number is. If a concept fundamental to a mighty science give rise to difficulties, then it is surely an imperative task to investigate it more closely until those difficulties are overcome, especially as we shall hardly succeed in finally clearing up negative numbers or fractional or complex numbers, so long as our insight into the foundation of whole structure of arithmetic is still defective. Many people will surely be thinking this not this not worth the trouble. Naturally, they suppose this concept is adequately dealt with the elementary textbooks, where the subject is settled once and for all. Who can believe that he has anything still to learn on so simple a matter? So free from all difficulty is the concept of positive whole number held to be, that an account of it for fit for children can be both scientific and exhaustive, and that every schoolboy, without any further reflection or acquaintance with what others have thought, knows all there is to know about it. The first prerequisite for learning anything is thus utterly lacking. I mean, the knowledge that we do not know. The result is that we will rest content with the crudest of views, even though since Herbart's day a better doctrine has been available. It is sad and discouraging to observe how discoveries once made are always threatening to be lost again in this way, and how much work promises to have been done in vain, because we fancy ourselves as so well off that we need not bother to assimilate its results. My work, too, as I am well aware, is exposed to this risk. A typical crudity confronts me when I find calculation described as aggregative mechanical thought. I doubt whether there exists any thought whatsoever answering to this description. An aggregative imagination even might sooner be let pass, but that has no relevance to calculation. Thought is in essentials the same everywhere. It is not true that there are different kinds of laws of thought to show the different kinds of objects thought about. Such differences as there are consist only in this, that the thought is more pure or less pure, less dependent or more upon psychological influences and on external aids such as words or numerals, and further to some extent too in the finer or coarser structure of the concepts involved. But it is precisely in this respect that mathematics aspires to surpass all other sciences, even philosophy. The present work will make it clear that even an inference like that from n to n plus 1, which on the face of it is peculiar to mathematics, is based on general laws of logic, and there is no need of special laws for aggregative thought. It is possible, of course, to operate with figures mechanically, just as it is possible to speak like a parrot, but that hardly deserves the name of thought. It only becomes possible at all after the mathematical notation has, as a result of genuine thought, been so developed that it does the thinking for us, so to speak. This does not prove that numbers are formed in some peculiar mechanical way, as Sand says formed out of granules. In their own interest, mathematicians should, I consider, combat any view of this kind, since it is calculated to lead the disparagement of a principal object of their study and of their science itself along with it. Yet, even in the works of mathematicians are to be found expressions of exactly the same sort. The truth is quite the other way. The concept of number, as we shall be forced to recognize, has a finer structure than most of the concepts of other sciences, even though it is still one of the simplest in arithmetic. 2 minutes break. In order then to dispel this illusion that the positive whole numbers really represent no difficulties at all, but that universal concord reigns about them, I have adopted the plan of criticizing some of the views put forward by mathematicians and philosophers on the questions involved. It will be seen how small is the extent of their agreement, so small that we find one dictum precisely contradicting another. For example, some hold that units are identical with one another, others that they are different, and each side supports its assertion with arguments that cannot be rejected out of hand. My object in this is to awaken a desire for a stricter inquiry. At the same time, this preliminary examination of the views others have put forward should clear the ground for my own account. By convincing my readers in advance that these other paths do not lead to the goal and that my opinion is not just one among many, all equally tenable. And in this way, I hope to settle the question finally, at least in essentials. I realize that as a result, I have been led to pursue arguments more philosophical than many mathematicians may approve. But any thorough investigation of concept of number is bound always to turn out rather philosophical. It is a task which is common to mathematics and philosophy. It may well be that the cooperation between these two sciences, in spite of many demarcates from demarques, what does demarques mean? It means initiative. From both sides is not so flourishing as could be wished and would, for that matter, to be possible. And if so, this is due in my opinion, to the predominance in philosophy of psychological methods of argument, which have penetrated even into the field of logic. With this tendency, mathematics is completely out of sympathy, and this easily accounts for the aversion to philosophical arguments felt by many mathematicians. When Stryker, for instance, calls our ideas of numbers motor phenomena and makes them dependent on muscular sensations, no mathematicians can recognize his numbers in such stuff or knows where to begin to tackle such a proposition. An arithmetic founded on muscular sensations would certainly turn out sensational enough, but also every bit as vague as its foundation. No sensations are absolutely no concerns of arithmetic. No more are mental pictures formed from amalgamated traces of early sense impressions. Wow, no more mental pictures from amalgamated, which means combine or unite traces of earlier sense impressions. All these phases of consciousness are characteristically fluctuating and indefinite, in strong contrast to the definiteness and fixity of the concept and objects of mathematics. It may, someone ping me once again. It may, of course, serve some purpose to investigate the ideas and changes of ideas which will occur during the course of mathematical thinking. But psychology should not imagine that it can contribute anything whatever to the foundation of arithmetic. To the mathematician, as such, these mental pictures with their origins and their transformations are immaterial. Stryker himself states that only idea he associates with the word hundred is the simple hundred. Others may have the idea of letter C or something else. Does it not follow, therefore, that these mental pictures are so far as concerns us and the essentials of a problem, completely immaterial and incidental as chalk and blackboard, and indeed that they do not deserve to be called ideas of the number 100 at all. Never then, let us suppose that the essence of the matter lies in such ideas. Never let us make a description of the origin of an idea, of a definition of or an account of the mental and physical conditions of which we become conscious of a proposition for a proof of it. A proposition may be thought, and again it may be true. Let us never confuse these two things. We must remind ourselves it seems that a proposition no more ceases to be true when I cease to think of it than the sun ceases to exist when I shut my eyes. Wow. Otherwise, in proving Pythagoras' theorem, we should be reduced to allowing for the phosphorus content of the human brain. An astronomer should hesitate to draw any conclusions about distant paths for fear of being charged with anachronism. Anachronism. What the fuck is anachronism? So many heavy words. Holy shit. Chronological inconsistency in some arrangement. The fact that our idea of number is a product of evolution and there's a history behind it, it might be doubted whether by that time it has progressed so far. How could they profess to know that the proposition 2 by 2, 2 into 2 is equal to 4, was already in existence in the remote epoch? Might not the creators then extant have held the proposition 2 into 2 equal to 5, from which the proposition 2 into 2 equal to 4 was only evolved later through a process of natural selection in the struggle for existence? Why it might even be that 2 into 2 equal to 4 itself is distant in the same way. Est modus in rebus sunt certidinic finds. The historical approach, with its aim of detecting how things begin and of arriving from these origin knowledge for their nature, is certainly perfectly legitimate, but it has also its limitations. If everything were in continual flux and nothing maintained itself fixed for all time, there will no longer be any possibility of getting to know anything about the world, and everything would be plunged in confusion. We suppose it would seem that concepts sprout in the individual mind like leaves on a tree, and we think to discover their nature by studying their birth. We seek to define them psychologically in terms of the nature of the human mind. But these accounts make everything subjective, and if we follow it through to the end, does away with the truth. What is known as the history of concept is really a history of either of our knowledge of concepts or of the meaning of words. Often it is only after immense intellectual effort, which may have continued over centuries, that humanity at last succeeds in achieving knowledge of a concept in its pure form. In stripping of the irrelevant accretions which veil it from the eyes of the mind, what then are we to say of those who, instead of advancing the work where it is not yet completed, despise it and betake themselves to the nursery, or bury themselves in the remotest conceivable periods of human evolution, there to discover, like John Stuart Mill, some gingerbread or pebble arithmetic? It remains only to ascribe to flavor of the bread some special meaning for the concept of number. A procedure like this is surely the very reverse of rational and as unmathematical at any rate as it could well be. No wonder the mathematicians turn their backs on it, to the concepts as we approach their supposed sources reveal themselves in peculiar purity. Not at all. We see everything as through a fog, blurred and undifferentiated. It is as though everyone who wished to know about America were to try to put himself back in the position of Columbus, at the time when he caught the first dubious glimpse of his supposed India. Of course, a comparison like this proves nothing, but it should, I hope, make my point clear. It may well be that in many cases the history of earlier discoveries is a useful study as a preparation for further researches, but it should not up to usurp their place. So far as mathematicians are concerned, an attack on such views would indeed scarcely have been necessary, but my treatment was designed to bring each dispute to an issue for the philosophers as well, as far as possible, so that I found myself forced to enter a little into psychology, if only to repel its invasion of mathematics. Besides, even mathematical textbooks do at times lapse into psychology, when the author feels himself obliged to give a definition, yet cannot when he tends to give at least description of the way in which we arrive at the object or concept concerned. These cases can easily be recognized by the fact that such explanations are never referred to again in the course of the subsequent exposition. For teaching purposes, introductory devices are certainly quite legitimate, only they should always be clearly distinguished from the definitions. A delightful example of the way in which even mathematicians can confuse the grounds of proof with the mental or physical conditions to be satisfied if the proof is to be given is to be found in E. Schrödinger. Under the heading Special Axiom, he produces the following. The principle I have in mind might well be called the axiom of symbolic stability. It guarantees that throughout all our arguments and deductions, the symbols remain constant in our memory or preferably on paper. Introductory devices are certainly quite legitimate, only they should allow a life example of the way in which human man can confuse the grounds of proof and the mental proof given found in the principle I have in mind might as be called axiom of symbolic stability. It it guarantees us throughout all organic dictionaries, symbol remain constant in our or preferably on paper and so on. No less essential for mathematics than refusal of all assistance from directional psychology. It is the recognition of its close connection with logic. I go so far as to agree with those who hold that it is impossible to effect any sharp separation of two. This much everyone would allow that any inquiry into the congruency of a proof or the justification of a definition must be a matter of logic. But such inquiries simply cannot be limited from mathematics, for it is only through answering them that we can attain honestly certainty.
What happened?
Nothing.
Okay.
Just taking a break. Why you want to sleep?
No, because you stopped reading.
Did you even understand anything?
No, I just sit and listen. Try to understand.
Holy shit, this is so difficult.
Yeah, that's
The
why I don't
language.
understand stuff and I don't try to because it's not my cup of tea.
Make it.
I'm bad at making tea and coffee fat. I only make milk.
Hmm. Do you have at least any idea what the author is trying to say you?
No. Maybe maths? That maths and psychology connects together. No, not psychology. What's that? Philosophy. Philosophy. Yeah. I get confused between both of them every time.
Hmm. So he's trying to like find the origin of the numbers, or when we say one, the number one comes into our mind, right?
Yeah, it
The
does.
but is it actually a thing, or what is the origin of this thinking, right?
Like, I mean, what does he want? Like, who created the number one thingy symbol, or why does it come into our mind? The number,
Yeah.
like that's
Why
psychology
does
stuff,
it
right?
ex-
Mind
why
stuff.
does it exist the way it exists in our mind?
That's a stupid question you can ask.
Mhm. It is not.
How so?
Like when I say one
Yeah,
to
I
a
get
kid,
the number one,
to
the
a
single
kid,
thing.
it is not number one in a kid's mind. It is either something like a finger, because everyone starts counting through fingers, right?
Yeah,
Most of the people. So
yeah,
for them, it is different.
yeah,
Then we learn the symbol.
true. But later it comes as one, the number.
Yeah. So there's that special axiom. The
What's the
principle I
axiom?
have in mind, the principle I have in mind might well be called the axiom of symbolic stability. It guarantees us that throughout all our arguments and deductions, the symbols remain constant in our memory or preferably on paper.
I mean, true. Like whenever I remember the word fat, I associate it with you and your face,
Yeah,
and Jin and his voice. Like we associate stuff with other stuff, so we can relate.
yeah.
We find
Symbolic stability.
similarities and what's that called? Like patterns. Patterns. Yeah, humans are hardwired to find patterns.
Hmm.
Have you read about that? The humans are really drawn towards patterns, and we've been doing that for the past millions of years.
Holy shit, you just did philosophy. Wow.
No. If you watch any sci-fi movie, that's the first thing they say in that. I get bored of that line every time I watch a movie. But
Hmm.
seriously though, I read one article, I think like maybe two or three paragraphs. Humans are really hardwired to find patterns in human. The more symmetrical the human face is, the more prettier it looks to the human face, human mind.
Hmm.
That's an Nat Geo documentary. You should watch that.
Hmm.
The way people perceive things, or people find people attractive in their face, is due to the symmetry in the face lines and jaws. That's why.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Be right back.
Okay.
Hey guys.
No less essential for mathematics than the refusal of all assistance from the direction of psychology is the recognition of its close connection with logic. I go so far as to agree with those who hold that it is impossible to effect any sharp separation of the two. Wait, what? No less essential for mathematics than refusal of all assistance from the direction of psychology is the recognition of its close connection with logic. I go so far as to agree with those who hold that it is impossible to effect any sharp separation of the two. This much everyone would allow, that any inquiry into the cogency of a proof or the justification of a definition must be a matter of logic. But such inquiries simply cannot be eliminated from mathematics, for it is only through answering them that we can attain to the necessary certainty. Cogency, the quality of being clear, logical. Our proof for the justification of definition must be a matter of logic, but such inquiries simply cannot be eliminated from mathematics, for it is only through answering them that we can attain to necessary certainty. In this direction too I go, certainly further than is usual. Most mathematicians rest content in inquiries of this kind when they have satisfied their immediate needs. If a definition shows itself tractable when used in proofs, if no contradictions are anywhere encountered, and if connections are revealed between matters apparently remote from one another, this leading to an advance in order and regularity, it is usual to regard the definition as sufficiently established, and few questions are asked as to its logical justification. This procedure has at least the advantage that it makes it difficult to miss the mark altogether. Even I agree that definitions must show their worth by their truthfulness. It must be possible to use them for constructing proofs. Yet it must still be borne in mind that rigor of the proof remains an illusion, even though no link be missing in the chain of our deductions, so long as the definitions are justified only as an afterthought, while failing to come across any contradiction. By these methods, we shall at bottom never have achieved more than an empirical certainty, and we must really face the possibility that we may still in the end encounter a contradiction which brings the whole edifice down in ruins. For this reason, I have felt bound to go back further into the general logical foundations of our science than perhaps most mathematicians would consider necessary. In the inquiry that follows, I have kept to three fundamental principles: always to separate sharply the psychological from the logical, the subjective from the objective, never to ask for the meaning of a word in isolation but only in the context of a proposition, never to lose sight of the distinct between concept and object. Got it, Vamsi?
Kind of.
What?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Wow, very generic answer.
Yeah.
In the text that will follow, you know what's an inquiry, right?
Yeah.
What is it?
To investigate. Let's.
Oh, yeah, to investigate. So the author has kept three fundamental principles to separate the psychological from logical and subjective from objective. Okay,
Okay. How does he determine something from subjective to objective? It's all subjective, right?
because no, one is not equal to two. That's objective.
Yeah, but what he is pursuing is really, really subjective.
Yeah, but it hasn't come yet. The text is about the inquiry is after this. Okay.
Okay, go on.
Never to ask for the meaning of a word in isolation, but only in the context of a proposition. Do you know what's a proposition?
No, I don't explain that.
Google it.
What?
Proposition. Google the word proposition.
Proposition means a deal, right? I have a plan for you, or it's just a statement or assertion that expresses a judgment or opinion. Hmm.
So
It's a scheme or plan of action.
a- assertion is basically a strong opinion, like you have a very uh, a confident and forceful statement or fact or belief, like asserting dominance.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
that's an assertion. Never to lose sight of the distinction between concept and object. An object is an object. A concept is a concept. Concept is something. It's in our mind.
Okay.
It's not a thing that exists in as a physical entity,
Hmm.
like laws, the force laws and shit. Those are concepts. In compliance with the first principle, I've used the word idea always in psychological sense and have distinguished ideas from concepts and from objects. If the second principle is not observed, one is almost forced to take as the meanings of word mental pictures or acts of the individual mind, so to offend against the first principle as well. As to the third point, it is a mere illusion to suppose that concept can be made an object without altering it. From this, it follows that widely held formalist theory of fractional negative numbers is untenable. What is untenable?
Let me search that.
Unobtainable, maybe. Undefendable. Not able to be supported or defended against criticism. Yeah. From this, it follows that widely held formalist theory. What is a formal theory? Formal theory is by political science. Is formal axiomatic system, something representable by symbols. Okay. How I propose to improve upon it can be no more than indicated in the present work. With numbers of all these type, as with the positive whole numbers, it is a matter of fixing the sense of an identity. My results will, I think, at least in essentials, when the adherents of those mathematicians who take the trouble to attend to my arguments. They seem to me to be in the air, and it may be that every one of them singly, or at least something very like it, has been already put forward, though perhaps presented as they are here in connection with each other, they may still be novel. I have often been astonished at the way in which Writers who on one point approach my view so closely, on others depart from it so violently. Their receptions by philosophers will be varied depending on each philosopher's own position. But presumably, those empiricists, do you know what's an empiricist?
No.
So, empiricist is someone who gains knowledge by through senses.
In philosophy, empiricism is a theory that states the knowledge comes from only or primarily from sensory experience. So you have
Yeah,
to feel it to
yeah.
gain knowledge from it.
Learn about it.
That doesn't make any sense. Like that sounds
It
so
does. It
stupid.
does. It does. You touch a stone to tell it is a stone. You touch a sand
Yeah.
to tell it is a
What
sand.
if I don't know how the ocean looks like? I never lived near the ocean.
What?
Yeah. Let's just say I don't know how.
But in your mind, you can tell it's a different thing, and you can name whatever you wanted,
Yeah. Let's just
right?
say I never lived in an ocean near an ocean, but never saw
Yeah.
an ocean, but only saw it in the pictures. So how's
Well,
so
that's because it's a knowledge attained from different people.
yeah, but that empirism is not what to say viable there. Hmm.
No, no, no. It's definitely viable. It's not saying that. So it's not saying. So the empiricists, obviously, there are no two true empiricists. Everyone, like a true empiricist, would be someone who only believes something that can they can touch, and that's how humans should be, don't you think? They should not believe whatever comes in pictures.
Yeah, true, but something that has been proven, like the Earth is round when you
Yeah,
touch the.
because you trust those people to not be wrong, but you can never know.
So, do you think the Earth is flat?
Sure,
I
you
mean,
cannot know.
you're the one who's saying that you cannot
I'm
know.
not saying it because it is commonly known that it is not, but you can not know unless you see it for yourself. You are not super sure about it.
Are you sure, Fat? Like, are you an empiricist or are you a normal guy?
Everyone is an empiricist.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
let's take an example of something you never touched or seen, but you can feel it or you know how it's like. Like, have you ever seen a cheetah, Fat? No, fuck off.
But uh,
This is YouTube, by the way, Fat. Remember?
I don't think it would have picked it up, but that's okay.
It picked it up, so fuck off.
Make it private.
It even picks up your what's that? The clothes rubbing voice. Yeah. So yeah, careful. Uh,
Yeah. I need cut that snippet and send it to you know who.
sure. Okay. Let's just say, have you ever seen a whale? You never seen a whale, right?
No.
Yeah. Do you think whales exist?
Obviously they do, but I I mean obviously I'm not gonna be dumb and say that they do not because
I mean, don't you
I've
think
met
this?
I have met people who have seen whales, and there is a lot of evidence around me that whales exist, like millions and trillions of
I mean,
evidence. But
they can be lying too, according to these empirics, right? This idea
but
is
but
so dumb.
here's the thing. My sense says that I am on this laptop, which is connected to the internet.
I mean,
Uh,
the internet's lying to you. The lizard people are
no, no,
lying
no.
to
So
you.
no, no, no. So the internet, I already know that there are people on the other side too. Correct?
Yeah, true,
Because I have met people who are also on the internet.
true.
I have used internet from different places, and I have put information on internet. So it is through my sense that I can tell that it is true because
I mean, you haven't seen this or touched these things for yourself, right? That's what the definition says. and you
Yeah,
haven't
but
seen
so
them.
obviously I'm not a true empiricist. You don't necessarily have to touch you.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
feel or see them, I guess, or hear
yeah.
them.
So see them, or hear them.
Okay, let's go move on. Spent enough time
Yeah.
here.
Read what is induction. Induction in philosophy.
OBS disconnected. Why? Why did it disconnect? Wait a minute. Can you see the screen?
I'm not looking at.
OBS reconnection successful. Huh.
Okay. Look at the meaning of induction in philosophy. Inductive reasoning.
Inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is a logical process in which multiple premises, all believed true or found true, most of the time are combined to obtain a specific conclusion. Okay, it's not saying that I don't have enough evidence, but all the evidence point this way, so I'll go this way. That's what it says.
No, no. What is induction? Induction, not inductive reasoning. Sorry.
Okay.
I mean, it is. It makes this. It means the same thing, but induction is something else. Induction in philosophy. Sorry.
In philosophy, inductive reasoning or induction is defined as a reasoning based on detailed facts and generic principles, which are eventually used to research a specific conclusion. Okay. Okay, what's reasoning?
Induction is specific form of reasoning in which premises of an argument support a conclusion, but do not ensure it. What?
Okay, what does it mean
It
by that?
it means that if the so say for example, one uh, uh, so a man has two eyes. Vamsi has two eyes.
Yeah,
Correct.
true.
So Vamsi is a man.
A person.
Sorry. A man. Every man has two eyes. Vamsi is a man, so Vamsi has two eyes. So
Some man.
Vamsi has two eyes is a conclusion, and your the other two statements are premises or arguments that support this conclusion. So if inductive reasoning says that if your the two premises are correct logically, then your conclusion is also probably correct.
Okay.
That is meant by induction,
Okay.
and there is
I
deductive reasoning, which is opposite.
I have two eyes, but what if I'm not a man?
What?
Yeah, you said a person has two eyes and he's man and he's called Vamsi, right? So, what if I?
Every man has two eyes. Vamsi is a man, so Vamsi has two eyes. If Vamsi is not a man, then Vamsi cannot have two eyes.
So, what if I have one eye or I'm blind?
Nigga, that's not the point here.
Uh, YouTube fat.
What?
Sure. Now you fucked it up real bad.
Why?
That's fucking live, dude. What the fuck? People can
No
lose
one
their.
is no one is gonna report on it.
Yeah,
It it is
but let me get
it
this
is
straight.
gonna
People have
it is gonna be private anyways.
lost their jobs over this. You know that.
I know.
Streamers. Yeah. So you're supposed to be
PewDiePie
like.
hasn't, so fuck you.
PewDiePie. That was a really bad controversy, I'd say. So that's a bad example. That's a guy who can come back with
Not
anything.
really.
Yeah, it's a bad example because you know, yes, most of the time it's taken out of context and the N word is. I can feel his thingy, like his I can feel his rage and stuff, like the gaming part. It sometimes slips up, but I'm not saying that he did it on purpose. But there has to be some repercussions, I guess, or maybe not. Who am I to judge? I am to judge because I'm half black, right? We're all half black. No, we are half
Oh,
black and half Asian. So yeah, we can make
oh,
a fun of Asians and the black people because yeah, we have both the passes. Moving on, their reception by philosophers will be varied depending on the
okay.
context
So
used.
in induction, so there is two kind of reasoning: inductive reasoning, and deductive reasoning.
Okay,
So in inductive reasoning, your two premises can be, if your two premises are correct, then your conclusion can be correct, probably. There's a probability that your conclusion can be correct,
okay,
but you can never know, but you cannot be sure that it is correct. And in deductive reasoning, premises of the argument guarantee the conclusion. That is, if premises are true, then conclusion is always true in a deductive reasoning.
okay.
In inductive reasoning, it is probably true, not definitely true.
There's a percentage of it is true, but not 100%.
You cannot be sure, that's the thing.
Okay,
Hmm. Okay, going back to PDF. Their reception by philosophers will be varied depending on each philosopher's own position, but presumably those empiricists who recognize induction as the sole original process of inference, and even that as a process not actually of inference but out of habituation, will like them least. Someone or another perhaps will take this opportunity to examine the principle of his theory of knowledge. To those who feel inclined to criticize my definitions as unnatural, I would suggest that the point here is not whether they are natural, but whether they go to the root of the matter and are logically beyond criticism. I permit myself the hope that even the philosophers, if they examine what I have written without prejudice, will find in it something to use to them. Without prayer will find something of use to them. Okay. Empty pages, empty pages. Number one. After deserting for a time the old Euclidean standards of rigor, mathematics is now returning to them and even making efforts to go beyond them. In arithmetic, if only because many of its methods and concepts have originated in India. Wow. It has been the tradition to reason less strictly than in geometry, which was in the main developed by the Greeks. Did you know that, Vamsi?
know what the numbers are created by us.
Arithmetic is created in India.
Yeah,
Most of it,
yeah, I know that.
methods and concepts, and geometry by the Greeks.
Hmm.
The discovery of higher analysis only served to confirm this tendency, for considerable, almost insuperable, difficulties stood in the way of any rigorous treatment of these subjects, while at the same time, while small reward seemed likely for the efforts expended in overcoming them. Later developments, however, have shown more and more clearly that in mathematics, a mere moral conviction supported by a mass of successful application is not good enough. Proof is now demanded of many things that formerly passed as self-evident. Again and again, the limits to the validity of a proposition have been in this established for the first time. The concepts of function of continuity or of limit and of infinity have been shown to stand in need of sharper definition. Negative and irrational number, which had long since been admitted into science, have had to submit to a closer scrutiny of their credentials. In all directions, these same ideals can be seen at work: rigor of proof, precise delimitation of extent of validity, and as a means to this sharp definition of a concept's precise delimitation of extent of what is delimitation? Delimitation is action of fixing the boundary or limits of something. Delimitation, say, you got to prove precise delimitation of similarity, and as a means to this sharp definition of concepts. Number two, proceeding along these lines, we are bound eventually to come to the concept of number, and to simplest proposition holding of positive whole numbers, which form the foundation of the whole of arithmetic. Of course, numeral formula like 7 plus 5 equal to 12 and laws like associative law of addition are so amply proceeding along these lines, we are bound eventually to come to the concept of number and to the simplest proposition holding of positive whole numbers, which form the foundation of the whole of arithmetic. Rashid. Of course, numerical formula like 7 plus 5 equal to 12 and laws like associative laws of addition are so amply established by the countless application made of them every day that it may seem almost ridiculous to try to bring them into dispute by demanding a proof of them. But it is in the nature of mathematics always to prefer proof where proof is possible to any confirmation by induction. Euclid gives proofs of many things which any one would concede to him without question, and it was when men refused to be satisfied even with Euclid's standard of rigor that they were led to inquiry set in train by axiom of parallels. Thus our movement in favor of all possible rigor already outstripped in many directions and the demand originally raised, while the demand has itself continually grown in scope and urgency. The aim of proof is, in fact, not merely to place the truth of a proposition beyond all doubt, but also to afford us insight into the dependence of truths about one another. After we have convinced ourselves that a boulder is immovable by trying successfully to move it, there remains the further question: what is it that supports it so securely? The further we pursue these inquiries, the fewer become the primitive truths to which we reduce everything, and this simplification is in itself a goal pursuing. And this supplication is in itself is a goal worth pursuing, but there may even be justification for a further hope. If by examining the simplest cases we can bring to the light what mankind has there done by instinct and can extract from such procedures what is universally valid in them, we may not thus arrive at general foundations for forming concepts and establishing principles which will applicable also in more complicated cases. Are you dead, Vamsi?
No, I just muted my mic so it doesn't pick up the air.
Did you follow that?
No,
Why not?
because it's boring and yeah, I told you so.
But did you not go listen to this important wording? The aim of proof is, in fact, not merely to place the truth of a proposition beyond all doubt, but also to afford us insight into the dependence of truths upon one another. Do you understand the meaning of that statement?
No, English is
Why?
hard. But
Where
what's
is the
the
difficulty?
depends on dependence on the fruits upon one another? What the fuck does that mean?
Dependence of statements upon of true statement upon one another, basically. Truths are propositions that have been, verified, and the proof has been given, and it is known to be a truth.
Okay.
So, proof that uh, 1 plus 1 is always equal to 2. That's the truth.
True.
But what is the dependence between 1 plus 1 equal to 2 and 1 plus 2 equal to 3? That's what it means. So, the aim of proof is in fact not merely to place the truth of proposition beyond all doubt, but also for us insight into the dependence of truth upon one another. Truths upon one another. After we have convinced ourselves that a boulder is immovable by trying unsuccessfully to move it, there remains the further question, what is it that supports it so securely? So this means that they want to go to the bottom of every statement.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, once you have tried every method to disprove the or to disprove the statement, but still it remains distinct, immovable.
Okay, okay, I got that point.
Then next you ask what makes it so, what supports it so securely. That's the thing. The further we pursue these inquiries, the fewer becomes the primitive truths to which we reduce everything. And this simplification is in itself a goal worth pursuing. So the further we pursue these investigations,
Hmm.
the fewer become the primitive truths to which reduce everything. And this simplification is a goal worth pursuing. But there may even be justification for a further hope. If by examining the simplest cases, we can bring to light what mankind has set pattern by instinct and can extract from such procedures what is universally valid in them. So all of these are created by man's instinct, right?
Yeah.
They did it wasn't put in by someone else. It
Well,
wasn't written
do you
anywhere.
agree that fact?
I
That
mean, scientifically that makes sense.
yeah.
People just think up bullshit.
Huh? Do you think it's bullshit?
Yeah.
Okay. True, I guess. Or maybe not. Do you think it's true?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then.
I don't know.
That's the answer I was looking for.
No one knows. Philosophical motives too have prompted me to inquiries of this kind, the answers to the questions raised about the nature of arithmetical truths. Are
Just
they
go on to
a
the next one.
priori or a posteriori? What?
Nothing. Go on.
Yeah, I moved on to the next paragraph. Let me see how big this chapter is. 9, 10, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19. Oh boy, 20. Does it even end? It does not. Okay, got it. It does not end. So we'll read it to the 1, 2, we are on 3. We'll read it up to 5. Philosophical motives too have prompted me to inquiries of this kind, the answers to the questions raised about the nature of arithmetical truth. They are priori or a posteriori. Can you find the meaning of the priori or a and posteriori? Hello, Vamsi. Vamsi.
Okay, my mic's muted. I'll search that way.
Page number 26. Priori or posteriori.
Priori, right? That's yeah. A priori and a posteriori. The Latin phrase a priori and a posterior from the early
Just search for priori.
That's what I did, and let me find the definition. Relating to or denoting reasoning or knowledge which proceeds the theoretical direction rather than observing or experience. Okay, that means taking the notion, the meaning from the theory rather than experience. Okay, this is like opposite of the extremist,
A priori,
right?
What does it mean?
Relating to or denoting reasoning or knowledge which proceeds from theoretical deduction rather than observing or experience. So
Holy shit.
reasoning from theoretical from knowledge.
I need to see it myself, sorry.
Wow, you're acting like that guy now. What's that called again? Fuck, I forgot. History, fine,
Okay, got it.
empiricist. Yeah. So
Okay,
this is opposite of empiricist, right?
yeah.
Hmm.
A priori understanding are the assumptions that come before the rest.
Okay, prayer and possess both mean the same thing.
No,
Yeah, I
no.
can see the same meanings here.
It clearly says posteriori means presupposed by experience.
I'll send you the screenshots. I'll post it in voice text. 1 and 2.
Priori knowledge is a knowledge that is independent of all particular experiences, as opposed to a posteriori knowledge, which derives from experience. For example, proposition that all bachelors are unmarried is a priori, and the proposition that it is raining outside now is a posteriori. The distinction between the two terms is epistemological and immediately relates to the justification of why a given item of the knowledge is held. Yeah, which proceeds from theoretical deduction after than from observational experience. Clearly says it is in a priori in a way based on theoretical deduction rather than empirical observation. Correct?
I'll send you a screenshot. Take look at that.
I'm already looking at the screenshot.
No, the second one, third one I sent.
It's in statistics. Yeah, that's we are not studying statistics right now.
Yeah, but that means the same thing, right?
Let me see. The prayer is a probability distribution that represents your uncertainty over theta over for your sample any data and attempt to estimate it, usually noted by theta. The The posterior is a probability distribution representing your uncertainty after theta, your sample data denoted by theta is it's a conditional distribution because conditions, no, it's not the same thing.
Okay.
One is before you have sampled any data and you attempt to estimate it. Posterior is you have sampled the data and then you have estimated the result. Got it?
Yeah.
So posterior is using empirical evidence, that is knowledge from data, actual data. Philosophical motives too have prompted me to inquiries of this kind, the answers to the questions raised about the nature of arithmetical truths. Are they a priori or a posteriori, a synthetic or analytic? Must lie in this same direction. For even though the concepts concerned may themselves belong to philosophy, yet as I believe no decision on these questions can be reached without assistance from mathematics, though this depends, of course, on the sense in which we understand them. It not commonly happens that we first discover the content of a proposition and only later give the rigorous proof of it. You know what's a rigor, right?
Yeah. Strong, like
Yeah,
yeah.
hard, basically hard.
Yeah.
On other hand, more difficult lines, and often this same proof also reveals more precisely the conditions restricting the validity of the original proposition. In general, therefore, the question of how we arrive at the content of a judgment should be kept distinct from other question. Whence do we derive the justification of its assertion? Now, these distinctions between a priori and a posteriori, synthetic and analytic concern, as I see it, not the content of judgment, but the justification for making the judgment. Where there is no such judgment, the possibility of trying the distinction between vanishes. And a priori error is thus a complete a nonsense as say a blue concept. When a proposition is called a posteriori or analytical in my sense, this is not a judgment about the conditions, psychological, physiological, and physical, which have made it possible to form the content of the proposition in our consciousness.
Hello. Wait, I'll mute my mic.
Nor is it a judgment about the way in which some other man has come, perhaps erroneously to believe it true. Rather, it is a judgment about the ultimate ground upon which rests the justification for holding it to be true. This means that the question is removed from sphere of psychology and assigned, if the truth concerned is a mathematical one, to the sphere of mathematics. The problem becomes, in fact, that of finding the proof of proposition and of following it up right back to the primitive truths. If in carrying out this process we come only on general logical laws and on definitions, then the truth is an analytical one. Bearing in mind that we must take into account also all of propositions upon which the admissibility of any of the definition depends. If, however, it is impossible to give the proof without making use of truths which are not of a general logical nature but belong to the sphere of some special science, then the proposition is a synthetic one. For a truth to be posteriori, it must be impossible to construct a proof of it without including an appeal to facts, to truths which cannot be proved and are not general, since they contain assertions about particular objects. But if, on the contrary, its proof can be derived exclusively from general laws, which themselves neither need nor admit of proof, then truth is a priori. And that's basically the definition of posteriori and priori. Starting from these philosophical questions, we are led to formulate the same demand as that which had arisen independently in the sphere of mathematics, namely that fundamental propositions of arithmetic should be proved if any way possible, with the utmost rigor. For only if every gap in chain of deductions is eliminated with the greatest care can we say with certainty upon that primitive truths the proof depends, and only when these are known shall we be able to answer our original questions. Mhm. If we now try to meet this demand, we very soon come to propositions which cannot be proved so long as we do not succeed in analyzing concepts which occur in them to simpler concepts or to reducing them to something greater generality. Now, here it is above all number which has to be either defined or recognized as indefinable. This is the point which the present work is meant to settle. On the outcome of this task will depend the decision as the nature of the laws of arithmetic. To my attack on these questions themselves, I shall preface something which may give a pointer towards the answer. For suppose there should prove to be ground from other points of view for believing that fundamental principles of arithmetic are analytic, then these should tell also in favor of their being provable and the concept of number definable, while any grounds of believing the same truths to be posteriori would tell in the opposite direction. The rival theories here, therefore, may well be submitted first to a passing scrutiny. Oh, we have finished today for today. 28 pages, not bad.